Hello everyone, welcome back to the lecture series by Professor Anuradha Jain. Today we are going to discuss very important topic, that is business cycle and how it impacts the economy, what are the measures to control the drastic effect of the business cycle in the economy. If we see the world history, then history of the world economy is nothing but about the history of the business cycle. All we discuss is about ups and downs in the economy, recession, depression, prosperity, boom, etc. And 1929-30 Great Depression, everybody knows about it, and we know that how the world economy suffered during the Great Depression and what were the causes and effects of the Great Depression. But for long 80 years there was no such fluctuation in the economy, and then after 80 years we saw the 2007 and 8 great recession, which affected the whole world again. And today, if we see, then again the situation is there, and all the economists have already predicted that there will be a great recession again, and this recession may be the worse than what has happened in 2007 and 8. So it means that time period may be more or less, but these fluctuations are bound to happen in the economy because the economic variables keep on changing. Variables like aggregate demand, aggregate supply, and the needs of the economy, the demand from the consumers, etc. So therefore the changes in the economy need to happen and bound to happen. So, and it becomes very important for all the individual firms, household, even the business sector or the banking sector and the government to understand the concept and causes and effects of business cycle, so that at least we can minimize the impact of these ups and downs in the economy on our business and even for the consumers as well. So we are going to discuss this topic in detail in this session. Business cycles are economy-wide fluctuations in total national output, income and employment, usually lasting for a period of 2 to 10 years, marked by widespread expansion or contraction in most sectors of the economy. And economic history shows that no economy grows in a smooth and even pattern. A country may enjoy several years of economic expansion and prosperity with rapid increase in stock price or housing price. Then the irrational exuberance may flip over to irrational pessimism, as we have seen during the 2007-8 period. Lenders stop issuing mortgage or car loans on favorable terms. Banks slow their lending to businesses and spending declines, and consequently national output falls, unemployment rises, and profits and real income decline. So eventually the bottom is reached and recovery begins. The recovery may be incomplete, or it may be so strong as to lead to a new boom. Prosperity may mean a long sustained period of brisk demand, plentiful jobs and rising living standards, or it may be marked by a quick inflationary flare up in prices and speculation followed by another slump. So upward and downward movements in output, inflation, interest rates and employment form the business cycle that characterizes all market economy. Now, although we call the short term fluctuations as cycle, the actual pattern is irregular. So, no two business cycle are quite the same. No exact formula such as might apply to the revolution of the planets or the swings of a pendulum can be used to predict the duration and timings of the business cycle. Rather, business cycles more closely resemble the irregular fluctuations of the weather. Business cycles, the periodic booms and slumps in the economic activities, are generally compared to ebb and flow in the economic activities. As we have discussed in the previous slide, the ups and downs in an economy are reflected by fluctuations in aggregate economic variables such as production, investment, employment, prices, wages, etc. The upward and downward movement in the economy show different phases of business cycle. So basically there are two phases in the cycle, that is prosperity and depression. But considering the intermediate stage between prosperity and depression, there are various phases of business cycle that appears in reality. The 5 phases of business cycle are mainly expansion, peak, recession, trough, recovery and expansion. In the previous slide, if you see the diagram, then the steady growth line shows the potential growth of the economy with increase in national resources and no economic fluctuations. The various phases of business cycle are shown by the line of cycle which moves up and on the steady growth line. So, the line of cycle moving above the steady growth line marks the beginning of the period of expansion or prosperity in the economy. The phase of expansion is characterized by increase in output, employment, investment, aggregate demand, sales, profit, bank credits, wholesale and retail prices, per capita income, per capita output and rise in the standard of living. The growth rate eventually slows down and reach the peak. Now the peak phase is generally characterized by slackening in the expansion rate, the highest level of prosperity and downward slide in the economic activities from the peak. The phase of recession begins when the downward trend in the growth rate becomes rapid and steady. So, output, employment, prices, etc. register a rapid decline, though the realized growth rate may still remain above the steady growth line or about the normal trend. So long as the actual growth rate exceeds or is equal to the expected steady growth rate, the economy enjoys the period of prosperity. When the growth rate falls below the steady growth rate, it marks the beginning of the depression in the economy. And the span of depression spreads over the period or growth rate stays below the steady growth rate. And the growth rate may decline to 0 or even to less than 0, or many developed countries experience a decline in their GDP during the global recession of 2008-9. Now, trough is a phase of depression during which the downtrend in the economy slows down and eventually stops, and the economic activities once again register an upward movement. So, trough is a period of most severe strain on the economy. When the economy tends to show a continuous and rapid upward trend in output, employment, etc., it enters the phase of recovery. So, though the growth rate may still remain below the steady growth rate, and when the recovery continues and the growth rate exceeds steady growth rate, the economy once again enter the phase of expansion and prosperity. So, what goes up must come down. The downturn marks the beginning of the recession. If economic fluctuations are not controlled by the government, the business cycle continues to reoccur over time. In the previous slide, we have discussed brief about the different phases of business cycle. But in this, we will see one by one what are the features of different phases of business cycle. So, if we talk about boom period, you can see that at the time of boom, there is an increase in employment in the economy. Why? Because there is more investment that is taking place. So, if there is more investment, then obviously employment will increase. And more employment means the income of the people increases, their wage rate also rises, or overall income increases. And if there is more income, then obviously the demand will increase, because demand is a function of income as defined by Keynes theory also. So, if demand increases in the economy, and you know the demand and supply features, that if there is increase in the demand, supply remaining constant, then price increases. Now, if there is increase in the price, that makes business more profitable, and therefore this will motivate investors to invest more, and as a result again the employment will increase, and overall there will be prosperity in the economy, and this cycle will continue. When there is a boom in the economy, then the demand for products and demand for labors also increases. And when there is more demand in the market for labors and factors of production, then this brings in less efficient means of production also, and therefore money market also become costlier, and demand for loans push up interest rate. Quality of investment begins to decrease, and this will lead to increase in the cost of production. And if cost of production increases, then prices of commodities rise sharply, and when there is increase in the prices of the commodities, then demand starts falling. And if demand goes down, then obviously then that will lead to decrease in the profit of the businessman, which will again demotivate investors to invest, and then the phase of recession starts in the economy. To discuss little more about recession, and if we discuss like what causes recession, then we can see that the decrease in spending by consumer due to lack of faith in the economy, and this will lead to less consumption, would mean decline in the demand for products. And if demand goes down, then manufacturers will cut down their production because they will not invest, as business is not that profitable, and which will also lower production and will lead to cut in the jobs, because if there is no investment, then there is no demand for labors, and if there is no demand for labors, then unemployment will increase, and if unemployment increases, their income goes down, their demand goes down, and which perpetuates the cycle due to limited spending also in the economy. If we talk about depression as a stage, you will see that the features of depression and recession are going in the same trend, but the difference is that recession is above the normal trend of the economy, and therefore there are profits, but profits are less than the boom period, or profits are going down. But in depression, it is below the normal trend, and here the investors starts incurring loss on their investment. So to see the features, we can see that price level falls, production decreases, unemployment increases, which will lead to decrease in the purchasing power, which will further lead to decrease in the demand, and if demand goes down, then businessmen will not invest, their productive activity slows down, production falls, there will be accumulation of the stock with the businessman, and overall the economies stop growing, and the profits of the businessman starts going down in the period of depression. In this slide, we will discuss about the recovery. After depression, the recovery stage starts, and during depression we have seen that only consumer goods are purchased, only the essential items are purchased. So durable goods remain unsold, and these old durable goods either get consumed or become obsolete. So purchase of goods again becomes necessary, and producer purchases these goods. So production is encouraged, and increase in the employment will be there, because if there is investment, then obviously they will need people to work over there. So that will lead to increase in the employment, and if employment increases, then their income increases, and with the increase in the income, the demand for consumer goods also increases, and this will further encourage to produce consumer as well as producer goods, and progress in both the industries will take place, and there will be again employment will increase, and the level of income increases, and then recovery period will come to the normal trend, and then maybe the boom period. Business cycles create devastating conditions for the economy. A fast growth leads to overheating of the economy, which ultimately ends in a rapid downturn in the economy. And if not controlled, it turns into economic depression, causing unemployment and poverty, and all sorts of economic misery, including national security. Now, for instance, as mentioned and discussed above, the global recession of 2008-9 caused a sharp decline in the growth rate and GDP of the world economy. As a result, most countries announced fiscal package and monetary measures to control the further deterioration in the economy. Although as world's economic history shows that many countries have suffered from business cycle in the past, but no sincere efforts were made by the government to control business cycle whenever they took place. Now in fact until the Great Depression of 1930s, there prevailed an orthodox economic belief known the classical thought that the working of economy should be left to the market forces of demand and supply, which will automatically maintain the balance in the economy and would prevent the occurrence of the business cycle. Now, however, the Great Depression proved this thought to be baseless and inapplicable under the modern conditions. So, besides, there emerged a new economic thought that if working of the economy is left to the market forces, then business cycles are bound to take place and a free economy is always open to the risk of business cycle. Now, stabilization does not mean like creating conditions for economic stagnation. So, stabilization broadly means preventing the extremes ups and downs or booms and depression in the economy without preventing the factors of economic growth to play their role. It also implies preventing over and underemployment. So, stabilizing does not mean rigidities. It should permit a reasonable degree of flexibility for self-adjusting forces in the economy. Now, if we talk about the control of business cycle, then the two most important and widely used economic policies to control business cycle are monetary policy and fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is also known as a counter-cyclical policy. A section of economists called fiscalists consider fiscal policy to be more effective than monetary policy because fiscal policy affects directly the private decisions while public expenditure does so indirectly. Now, if fiscal policy of the government is so formulated that it generates additional purchasing power during depression and reduces it during the period of expansion, then it is known as counter-cyclical fiscal policy. And there are various instruments of fiscal policy through which they control business cycle is like public expenditure, taxation or public borrowing. Mainly these are also known as the instruments of fiscal policy to control business cycle. Now, if we talk about monetary policy, then policy of the Reserve Bank of India to control the economic fluctuations in the economy is known as monetary policy. Then there are different instruments of monetary policy to control ups and downs in the economy. And these instruments are like open market operation, bank rate, repo rate, cash reserve ratio, statutory liquidity ratio and moral suasion, etc. So, thus the central bank adopts a dear money policy, borrowing by business and trade become dearer, difficult and selective. So, efforts are made to control excess money supply in the economy. To control a recession or depression, the central bank follows an easy or cheap monetary policy by increasing the reserves of commercial banks. It reduces the bank rate, interest rates of the bank, and it buys securities in the open market. It lowers margin requirement on loans and encourages bank to lend more to consumers, businessmen, traders, etc. Then there are some direct control methods also to control fluctuations in the economy. The aim of direct control is to ensure proper allocation of resources for the purpose of price stability. They are meant to affect strategic points of the economy. So, they affect particular consumers and producers. They are in the form of rationing, licensing, price and wage control, export duties, exchange control, quotas or monopoly control, etc. So, they are more effective in overcoming bottlenecks and shortages arising from inflationary pressures. So, their success depends on the existence of efficient and honest administration. So, otherwise they lead to black marketing, corruption, long queues, speculation, etc. So therefore, they are to be resorted to only in emergencies like war, or if there is any natural calamities or hyperinflation, etc.